UCF won big by 61 on Saturday. But what does it all mean?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. Turn us up, turn us on, we'll turn it out. I'm here with my good friend Andrew Gluchov, senior writer at UCFKnightZone.com. You were at the game on Saturday, Andrew, covering it live for us here at Locked On UCF. So on today's show, we're going to talk about the 68 burger that Scott Frost's squad dropped on North Carolina A&T. We're going to do some more evaluating of Taven Jackson. Now we have some more tape on that young man, and then talk about our main takeaways. But let's start at the top here. UCF scored 68 points in this one. It was an offensive explosion in some ways, but also in other ways, which we'll dig into. There are some things in the numbers and in the tape that you want to address. You dropped a very insightful article after the game on UCFKnightZone.com. Guys, please go check out that article. 560 total yards of offense for UCF. However, only 204 yards passing through the air, 356 on the ground. There were some really, really big plays in the run game that accounted for that 356. As a matter of fact, about 147 of them on two plays alone. And between Jacurri Brown and Jaden Nixon returned a kick for a touchdown. I mean, he had a big night. Jaden had a big night. But
he did.
I do want to start with this passing game suspect. And I think as a team, there was a clear jump in execution from game one to game two, although be it an easier opponent. However, before we started recording, you noted some things that maybe concerned you a little bit about this squad, even though they won by 61.
Well, part of the problem with a game like this is UCF was just head and shoulders talent-wise, just way better than North Carolina A&T. It wasn't even close. And as a result, the game was so lopsided, it actually masked and covered up some of the lingering concerns. And there are legitimate concerns on this team, going into this bye week. And you talk about the passing. And I thought Taven Jackson took a step back. Last week against Jacksonville State, came in relief. And while he checked down a bit early on, he kind of started selling in and made some really good throws. This week, he struggled in passes that led the receiver. He had a number that were just a step or two overthrown, or there was a couple that were dropped that should have been caught. And then there was the big pass to Dwayne Thomas Jr. that he caught at the one. That should have been a touchdown if it was more accurate.
More air under it, yeah.
Thomas bailed out Jackson by having a great diving catch, but basically Jackson's yards were largely on plays that were stop or comeback routes, and he was able to just throw it to a guy who was standing there. He wasn't moving, or he was barely moving. That's where the bulk of his yards came from, and that's cause for concern. We've talked. We obviously it's not the end all be all, but the PFF numbers at least give you something to talk about and something to kind of keep an eye on. And Taven Jackson was rated 60.7 in passing. That's not very good. I mean, Jacurri Brown was lower, but that's because he didn't throw the ball. You have to be a little bit concerned here. And you mentioned, I also want to step back and you mentioned the rushing yardage and how big that was. Well, there's a little bit of a smokescreen here, because there was 560 yards of total offense. 213 of that was in 3 plays. So you're talking 347 yards of total offense minus those 3 plays against a team that was just completely outclassed. That's not encouraging. That, again, it's easy to get caught up in the scoring because A&T was just flat out outclassed. UCF had a special teams touchdown. UCF had a defensive touchdown. They had 3 takeaways. Multiple. I think it was about 11 or 12 tackles for loss. Multiple sacks. Their defense just absolutely swallowed up A&T. But the offense, you had these big plays, but there was a lot of issues around that. And, our job is to, obviously take a look at that, but also to pump the brakes and have fans realize, you know what? Yeah, they dropped 68 in this one, and they did what they were supposed to do. They were favored by 37.5 points. But it's not all puppies and rainbows. And it's unfortunately, it's like, okay, well, here's the truth about it. But that's why we do what we do. And we cover the game. We talk about this stuff. We're going into a bye week. This gives the team an opportunity to really address some of these issues. I mean, the timing couldn't be better for a bye week.
Yeah, I do want to add this. Look, so in week 1, we learned that this team was a project and that they had some things they needed to work on. In week 2, I think they took some steps forward as a team, but there are still a lot of things left to correct, which, if our week 1 assessment is accurate, some of this was to be expected. I didn't expect them to clean everything up, but I thought that they dominated a team that they should have dominated. Now, one of the interesting stats in this game that I thought was a little unusual, but maybe not unusual for a Scott Frost offense, is the time of possession. Now, again, before we start recording, you noted to me that this is not unusual, but North Carolina A&T held the ball for 36 minutes in this game versus only 23 minutes for UCF. Talk to me about this. Why is this not unusual in a Scott Frost offense?
Well, let's look at the different time of possessions for this game. A&T had 1 drive under a minute, and it was an interception. It was a turnover. Everything else was a minute or longer. UCF had a 9-second drive, an 11-second drive. They were just 1-play runs. One was the 87-yard run by Jaden Nixon, and one was the 60-yard run by Jacurri Harris, or Jakari Brown. That is not overly surprising. So the longest drive by UCF in the game was the final scoring drive, 4 minutes and 56 seconds. The next longest was a 7-play drive that actually ended up being a punt of 3 minutes and 42 seconds. And then the third and fourth drives were 256 and 210 respectively. That's 4 drives right there. None of any other drive lasted 2 minutes of game time. If you were, fans would recall this back in the first Frost era, and we're seeing it again now. Not so much last week; they were still kind of feeling things out, but you're seeing the team come up to the line with 28 seconds, 25 seconds left in the play clock. They get they're lined up. They get their play. They snap it maybe 20 to 18 seconds on the clock. They don't allow rotations or substitutions by the defense because they run up to the line, and if the defense is trying to sub, they're going to snap the ball. Get that 12-man penalty or an offsides call because the guy didn't get off the field quick enough. So as a result, defense can't substitute. They get worn down. You make big plays. You cause a lot of upheaval. That's what Scott Frost offenses do. So what you saw last night in the execution aspect and the time management aspect is a lot more what a Scott Frost offense is going to be going forward.
Well, I'll tell you what it is going to be going forward is a mess if Taven Jackson does not get his stuff together. Look, I want to talk more about Taven Jackson in this Scott Frost offense right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Supply House. guys. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving towards progress with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Well, Supply House has next day delivery. Talk about a game changer. And their part finder tool and 3D schematics can save you hours on a job where every detail matters. Their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code HCollege5 for 5% on your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. This episode of Locked On UCF is also brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Look, college football season is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, it's just doesn't like it, guys. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I used Game Time. The app gives you the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up the Game Time app, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. You heard that right? As low as $25. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Taven Jackson is going to be the man that we look at quite a bit here. He went 12 for 21 for 189 yards. 0 touchdowns thrown. Could have won if he had hit Dwayne Thomas Jr. there stride there on that first drive. But look, 57% completion percentage is not going to get it done. Now, he didn't throw the ball a ton in this game, but you would like to see him hit a higher percentage of those passes. Now, look, PFF only credited one drop in this one. But that 2 plays before Dwayne Thomas Jr. makes the layout catch at the 1-yard line, Marcus Burke drops one I thought that was a better throw. And a catch that these receivers have to go out and make for this quarterback. You know, when you're up against better competition, a couple of weeks when they face North Carolina, he throws a ball like that, you got to catch it. You have to catch it if you expect to come away with the win. Scott Frost praised his wide receiver group coming into fall. He was very non-committal on quarterback, and maybe we're starting to see a little bit of why he was non-committal on quarterback, Andrew. It wasn't perfect, and he did make some plays in this game, and he played well enough for them to win by 61. As a matter of fact, you noted before we started recording, this is the first time since the 2017 season that UCF has scored a special teams, defensive, and an offensive touchdown in the same game. Can't do that without Taven Jackson, at least to some extent. But I don't know, man. I feel like he's got to get better. And this bye week comes at a great time for them to be able to sit down. You got 2 games worth of tape and say, son, here's where we need to improve. You got to process the game faster. You got to make your reads, and you have to be accurate with the football.
Well, here's true. I thought his progressions were not bad. I thought he did a pretty good job of moving through those. The pass protection was pretty good. He had time in the pocket, and he could stand around. The problem is just that deep ball accuracy. The middle third and the deep third, when these players are on the move, it needs a lot of work. As I said before, most of his yardage were from stop routes and comebacks. And sure, that helps, like, you can dink and dunk it, but that's not a Scott Frost offense. And if you're gonna help your offensive line who's struggling to block the run, you're gonna help them out, you got to stretch the field. You need to have that long ball touch because you got to get those guys to back off the box. And that was an area that UCF struggled at again. Their grades for their run block was suspect again, and against an even weaker opponent. So you need the quarterback to take advantage of the good pass blocking, which obviously, the big difference is, pass blocking is more agility based, because you're building that pocket and you hit, you pop back, you hit, you pop back, depending on which part of the line you're in. I played center, so it's funny. As a slight aside, one of the media members was talking to myself and another because we both had offensive line experience when we were younger, and was asking questions about the difference between run blocking and pass blocking. And I'm going in this whole thing about technique and the strength focus in the run blocking versus the agility of the pass blocking, and kind of geeked out a little bit. But it comes back to the fact of, if your pass blocking is on point, and it is, it's been solid, you have to take advantage of that. You have to convert. You have to make those passes. If you're getting those open guys, he's getting a step on, those receivers are getting a step on the defensive backs. You got to properly lead them. You got to get that timing down, and you've got a bye week to kind of tighten that up. But there's no excuse. You're an FBS quarterback for a Power 4 conference team. You have to make those throws.
I couldn't agree more. Look, I've said repeatedly on the show and on our website over at UCFNightZone.com, you're not going to get a ton of opportunities to play quarterback at this level as the guy. And so if you are Taven Jackson and you want to close the door on the guys behind you for the rest of the season, headed into North Carolina, you got to step up, and you've got to show that you can make the requisite amount of plays to win football games once you reach conference play, because it's going to get tougher. I thought that the schedule set up fairly well for UCF to figure out what kind of football team they were. Now, North Carolina looks a lot more mortal than maybe we thought they were headed into the season. Like, not as much. Nobody's afraid of Bill Belichick's North Carolina squad at this point. But if you're UCF, you can certainly make a big statement that you're not going to lay down for anybody, and you're going to win some football games that nobody expects you to win. That starts with quarterback play. It's just so hard to do it in today's college football without great quarterback play. Now, the Jackson is, there seems to be some pretty decent guys can get him. They'll make catch for him. He's just got to do his part. Right, Andrew?
Yeah, it comes down to just, execution. The game plan's there. The setup is there. The receivers are getting open. They're doing their part. The line's doing the part. It's just, you got to finish the job. And, against A&T, sure, you can get away with that because you're just so much bigger and stronger and better than this team. But you're going into Big 12 conference play in a few weeks, and you don't have that chance at that point. You have to start executing. UCF start after next week's North Carolina game. They go on the road against Kansas State, who had turned out to be way more mortal than anyone anticipated. And you know what? That's an opportunity for UCF to really clamp it down. It's important to win against North Carolina. If you have to choose between one or the other, it's more important to win against Kansas State. Aside from it being on the road, it's also a conference game. And as you know, you can never devalue a conference win versus a non-conference win. They both help towards bowl eligibility, but one leads towards a conference championship. The other one is does diddly poo. But there's no reason why UCF can't actually be competitive or win both these games. These teams have really failed to live up to expectation. And while UCF struggled in game one, they're still finding themselves. That's why Scott Frost commented in his press conference that the schedule actually worked out really well, that the bye week is now. this coming Saturday. So it's 2 and then 5 bye week and then 5, which when you think about it, works out really well. Because you got this brand new team, so you got the first 2 games out of the way. You got a good amount of film to work with. You got plenty of things that need to be worked on, and you know what to do. You work on it, then you hit your stride into the conference season. You're going to take some bumps during conference play. Then you get that bye right in the middle of it all, where you get a chance to rest and recoup, and then you go down the final stretch. I think UCF's schedule works really well to their favor. It's not an easy schedule, but the way it's laid out, home game versus road game, and which teams they're playing when, I think plays into them really well to surprise a few and maybe get beyond the 6-6 that a lot of fans have been clamoring for.
Well, look, 61-point victory I'll take over anything that looks close against a team like North Carolina A&T. But look, what are the main takeaways from this game? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at the Game Cap. Quick question for all you college football fans out there. If you can go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it would be the game. And if you can see right behind me, a vintage UCF hat. These aren't just hats. They're the same vintage styles fans wore back in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price they did back then. But when you use code Locked On, you'll get your vintage hat for just $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com. That's thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use code Locked On for an exclusive discount, because legends wear the game. What are our main takeaways from this one to close the show? I don't want to spend a ton of time here, but at the end of the day, Scott Frost is headed into his first bye week really early, might I add you, with some stuff to work on for his team. And I think that this actually works out well for him. You got 2 games against some opponents that you beat, so you didn't have to suffer a loss. You don't have to go into that bye week with that losing feeling and sit with it for 2 weeks. But you've got a lot of stuff to work on, man. And, I have to believe that in his process to return UCF to respectability after what Gus left, which was a 4-8 squad that, was demoralized, I think, by the end of the season, and a fan base that was definitely demoralized. You start at quarterback, and you got to bring that along. You got to bring him along. I saw guys flying around the ball defensively. I think that UCF has done a decent job defensively. Alex Grinch is bringing those guys along. But the questions will remain. My main takeaway is this offense still needs a ton of work, and I'm anxious to see how McKenzie, Milton, and Scott Frost develop quarterbacks, because you got Dante Carr and Kane Archer coming in here, and these guys, I want to know what kind of job they're going to do with the young guns, and we could get a taste of that by seeing how one of these quarterbacks develops into a respectable starter by the end of the season.
Yeah, there's a number of things to be concerned about, and they're mostly swirled around the offense. Special teams is did their job. Didn't have to do much on the kicking side. However, the return game that was beautiful to watch. That is Jaden Nixon's second career kickoff return for a touchdown, and he was talking about in his press conference. He was actually a lot of fun to listen to. Very animated, very a lot of energy. He was talking about TJ Bullard was basically saying, this is it. I could feel it, and lo and behold, it was. And that trend that also carried over to the offensive side, and he and Nixon said that the kickoff returns was a more special occasion because it doesn't it's rare for it to happen.
Yes,
you're comparing this kickoff return versus he had these 2 huge touchdown runs, but to switch over to the offensive side, A lot of concerns on the offensive line. The run blocking is just not there. Look at Jaden Nixon. He ran the ball 4 times. 2 of them were to the outside on the right side and ended up being long touchdowns. He ran 2 times up the middle for 3 yards. Then you look at Myles Montgomery. Myles Montgomery went a pedestrian 8 for 35. That is an under 4.5 yards per carry average. Now, it's good. They didn't have to use him nearly as much as last week. One of the things Scott Frost did say is he wanted to rotate more, did a good job with that. Mission accomplished there. But 4.4 average for your top back is not good. And it's not because of Montgomery. We've seen what he can do. It's the fact that this offensive line just struggles to create that explosiveness at the offensive line. We can talk about quarterbacks, but I'm more concerned about the run block of the offensive line, because if the quarterback struggles a bit, and let's be honest, this quarterback group is not a pass-centric group. They're not. We've already seen them struggle on those deep passes. They don't have the touch. That's where a guy like a Kane Archer, or Dante Carr, coming in as freshman next year, if everything holds as is, would really have an opportunity to find their way onto the playing field, because these are not pass centric quarterbacks. And to add on to that, because of that, you have to rely on the run. Well, if you can't run up the middle or off or even off tackle, because you can't just create that explosiveness, and you're dealing with those corn-fed Midwestern guys in the Big 12, you're in trouble.
Yep.
I mean, you're struggling against North Carolina A&T. How are you going to do against Baylor or Texas Tech? I mean, this is big corn-fed beef right there. And it's not gonna bode well. So what are you gonna do? Run outside for the rest of your life? To cap it on a happy note, though, I want to cap it on a happy note. To see Jaden Nixon wipe off the issues of last week, where he ended up with negative net yards, and he even said the equipment manager mentioned it to him. I mean, like, he was being dogged by everybody. So he had a bad taste in his mouth. He wanted to do it right, get back on track. He got the opportunity, and he made the best of it. And it shows how fast this guy is. You get to if he can turn the corner and get those jets going, he's gone. And he showed it. 2 runs to the outside, 2 touchdowns. Again, as I mentioned before, 3 plays on the ground between the 2 Nixon and the 60-yard Jacurri Harris. I don't know why I keep saying Harris. Jakari Brown, touchdown run. That's 213 yards in 3 plays. Scott Frost likes having the big plays, but you don't expect to get them on the ground. You take those out, the rest of the body of work is a lot more pedestrian, but it gives a really good blueprint at what they can do in the future to really exploit the talent of these guys.
Look, I agree. There were some big plays. I think the point is you're getting big plays when you need them so far through these first couple games. Can they continue to produce big plays headed into conference play? Yet to be seen. Either way, we'll be here to talk about it here at Locked On UCF. Andrew Gluchov, senior writer at UCFNightZone.com. Go check out his written work there and my written work too. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. It's another big moment on Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside 2-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holly, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch Locked On Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season and only on Fire TV. Catch us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.